Thank you, and hello everyone. Thank you very much for the organizers for making this fantastic conference possible. Can you hear me well?
It's good, yes.
Okay. And now I should be sharing both audio and image, hopefully. And I will also paste something on the chat. Okay. So for time reasons, I will only show a few sound examples, but I will share, as I did, the link on the chat if you would like to access to some more musical examples. It's a shared folder, should be okay. So I will be talking about musical OOPArts. The spectral movement, which took sound as a self-referential model, has been identified for its key developments in the domains of harmony, texture, and timbre, and has had a significant impact on a variety of contemporary musical styles. Previous examples to the timbral music from the 70s, emphasizing timbre over conventional musical parameters associated to a traditional syntax, such as melody, rhythm, and formulaic structures, are found in the compositions of György Ligeti, Jacinto Scelsi, Oliver Messiaen, and others. Even earlier examples can be observed within the classical and romantic periods. In the article Tempus Ex Machina, Gerard Grisey provides us with some notable examples from Mozart, Symphony No. 40 in the first movement, Brahms, Piano Concerto No. 2 in the first movement, Bruckner, Symphony No. 9 in the first and third movement, and Wagner, The Strangled at the beginning of the prelude, where the standard musical development is temporally suspended and replaced by iterations or extreme prolongations of sonic material, which produce a focus on the vertical axis of sound, almost as if composers were attempting to scrutinize the musical fabric through a microscope, although only momentarily. I would like to play a short sample. And so on. Additional examples in the same vein explored by Grisey are found in works by Beethoven, Symphony No. 6 in the second movement, Nachtigall, where time is suspended due to a senza-tempo bird-like gesture. There's also a break in the linear narrative of the Symphony No. 9, with what seems to be an early example of a musical loop, 13 bars before the end. Something similar happens with a passage of Liszt in the 3 Concertitude, Un Suspiro, marked Leggerissimo Volante, which presages the circular obsessiveness of vortex temporum. And so on. In the precedent examples, the temporal suspensions allow to focus on the quality of sound. However, I found several other passages in the musical literature which are especially relevant from a timbral perspective and that are related to other aspects distinct from the flow of time, including elements such as harmony, texture, gesture, tone color, and space. I will come back to this point later. To continue digging into notable musical peculiarities from the past, I would like to introduce the notion of musical OOPArt. OOPArts, or out-of-place artifacts, are archaeological and puzzling, presumably human-made objects, which do not belong to the time period were found. For instance, there is an OOPArt called the Antikythera mechanism, which forced to reconsider the estimated degree of advancement of the civilization where it was discovered. In the case of music, when we encounter musical OOPArts, we have to reconsider historical assumptions on the place of timbre in music from the past. While most of the archaeological objects have been discredited or proved hoaxes by researchers, I find the concept useful in music to describe intriguing sound objects which question conventional narratives of the linearity of history and of musical progress, particularly in relation to timbre, showing that certain musical situations were pushing perhaps always, but more and more frequently since the Romantic period towards a new notion of time, texture, and timbre. Musical OOPArts are non-motivic or thematic materials. Merlin Nuncombe argues that composers like Brahms and Liszt explored and revitalized neutral, that is to say, non-melodic or thematically relevant materials, which transitioned from being mere connectors or accompaniment to become foreground. Precisely, some of those innocuous or isolated musical materials have the potential to become musical OOPArts, breaking the traditional musical syntax to open timbral explorations. I would like to stress that these contextual anomalies are in fact that unique events. In precedent centuries to the 20th, the timbral textual non-developmental objects appeared more as an exception than as a rule, and apparently composers just let them occur with no attempt to capture or routinize them. In fact, they usually come unexpectedly and live inadvertently, followed by some conventional melodic formula, perhaps dictated by the status quo of their time, although for contemporary listeners, they strike as meaningful, discarding the possibility of being purely ornamental or digressional. Types of musical OOPArts. In the following lines, I offer some examples of musical OOPArts, sketching a taxonomy of their types. I should first warn that this classification is an exercise and that some elements that I will discuss could easily fit into more than one category due to the holistic nature of timbre. The first type of OOPArt, musical OOPArt, relates to rhythm. This is the previously examined type, including the examples presented by Gérard Grisset, where temporal suspensions direct the attention of the listener to immediate color, anticipating timbral-based music. The second one relates to harmony, perhaps the most obvious parameter moving from the tonal system era to what could be called the century of timbre, that is to say the 20th and beginning of the 21st, is harmony. Harmony in relation to timbre is important because, as Tristan Murail states, these two elements work as a continuum. Harmony, understood as a collection of frequencies, plays a key role in defining the overall color of a sound, not just from a pitch perspective, but impacting more nuanced perceptual qualities, such as brightness or mellowness, and even creating emotional associations. For instance, harmony can make us consider a sound as aggressive, sweet, or mysterious. In the third movement of Beethoven's Waldstein Sonata, there is a harmonic progression in which three chords call my attention. The three suspects are harmless dominant seventh chords, although colored with sharp ninths: C7 sharp ninth, F7 sharp ninth, and B flat 7 sharp ninth. To my jazzy ears, we're transported all of a sudden to the world of Jimi Hendrix, funk, and fusion music. Even if in the context of Beethoven these oddities are only expressive additions, they are opening the door to working with harmony as color and paving the way to what will come later with Debussy, Scriabin, and others. And this is the excerpt. And so on. The third type of musical OOPArt relates to texture. Musical texture can be defined by the number of layers and the hierarchies or relationships between the component sounds. According to Panayotis Kokoras, the paradigmatic texture of our time is what he calls holophony, which is a combination or synthesis of different sounds into a whole. The emergence of this kind of texture is partly explained by the development of electroacoustic music, where the traditional categories of texture, monophony, polyphony, homophony, are replaced by open and mixed textures, resulting in a continuum of sound. If we listen to the opening of the sixth movement of Mahler's Das Lied von der Erde, Der Abschied, we encounter a musical material that cannot be classified under the traditional textural types. it is really a sound object, which could have time traveled from the middle of the 20th century to create this introductory atmosphere that is not melody, neither harmony, nor any other conventional musical constituent. By building a refined orchestration, Mahler is anticipating the notion of composing the sound itself instead of composing with a predetermined palette of sounds. As usual with musical opwards, this anomalous moment is quickly abandoned and then it turns into a conventional accompanied melody. The fourth type of musical opart relates to gesture. Gesture is perhaps one of the most recent interests of musical scrutiny, along with timbre. Musical gestures are linked with physical actions literally or figuratively. Considering gesture in its metaphorical aspect, that is, as a musical material characterized by active movement, I would like to concentrate on a musical example from Richard Strauss that appears in the Alpine Symphony. It is found near rehearsal number 43 and marked at the waterfall, where extremely fast descending note streams not only effectively achieve the association with a cascade, but also surprise because of the novelty of the gesture and the brightness of the orchestration. Since the music is fast, it leaves a memorable sound signature, thus gesture becomes timbre. Here, Strauss anticipates the material of page 31 in Griset's Partial. Etc. The fifth musical opart relates to tone color. It may seem tautological to discuss a timbre defining object in terms of its tone color, but I wish to refer to a very specific case, which is when special attention is given for creating a new sound in a more deliberate way. There are several examples in the literature where sound is altered to produce an effect, but there are cases where an effect acquires transcendence. If we pay attention to bars 84 to 85 of Wagner's Das Rheingold, Entrance of the Gods into Valhalla, we will encounter sound blocks which could perfectly belong to a passage orchestrated by Olivier Messiaen, who would later introduce the notion of harmonic timbral complex, by the way. This example is especially interesting since we have a reference in the same movement to compare it to. Bars 84 to 85 are a sort of zoom-in or distorted version of the precedent bars 68 to 69, which are indeed more conventional in their sonority. It seems that Wagner is opening the possibility of incorporating timbre as a procedure for musical development. And this is the elaborate version I was referring to. And then usual. The sixth musical opart relate to space. The final type of musical opart I have reflected upon carries us into a more distant past than the Romantic era. Long time before the days of amplification, effect pedals, and recording studio techniques, the spatial considerations were relevant. Space dramatically affects timbre. Take, for instance, bars 10 to 15 of Gabriele's Canzone in Eco Adice. The written echo effects and panning effects, if performed in two opposing choruses, in addition to the resonances of an enclosed space, provide the brass instruments with a timbre completely different to the one achieved in open spaces. By writing echoes in the score, Gabriele enhances an acoustic phenomenon, and in this way becomes one of the precursors of turning form and material into one thing. One could also discuss the associated practice of stereophonic choruses, no doubt a visionary out-of-place practice or opera. And so on. Conclusions. Several taxonomies of sound objects or musical types have been attempted since Pierre Schaeffer. I'm particularly attracted to the thoughts of Helmut Lachenmann on this respect and to the more experimental approach proposed by Javier Aubois with the temporal semiotic units. These new systems of classification have emerged as a necessity to organize contemporary musical entities which do not conform to traditional grammars of music and that are heavily structured on timbre. Some of these sonic entities, born long ago but described only in recent decades, have existed as out-of-time musical fragments in precedent centuries, perhaps ignore objets à découvrir of their days, which acted as windows to the music of the future. Musical OOPArts are a testimony of the weirdness of history and perhaps the ubiquity of certain musical aspects beyond time. They also suggest the possibility that being attuned to current singularities, could be contemporary musical OOPArts, could influence in a more conscious manner the music to become. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Felipe. I think we can take one question if anyone would like to indicate their interest in the chat.
What about electronic music?
Oh, James, yeah, you mentioned Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet opening, definitely, and thank you for that example. I'm a collectionist of these weird objects, so I see definitely a relationship between these objects from music from the past and electronic music. I don't know if you would like to maybe develop more the question to a specific situation, perhaps.
Well, how did electronic music arrive? Didn't it develop from instrumental music? And with electronic music, it soon became sonorities that had no pitch. A lot of it has no pitch, and I think that's what you're talking about, is music that doesn't have pitch as its central focus.
Right. I mean, to give another example, for me, the Varese music, even the instrumental music of Varese, is kind of electronic music in a sense. I think if he had the medium before, he would be doing that. But so for me, it is interesting that you don't need, I mean, technology came at some point, but the concept of building and creating music based on timbre was before that, I think.
I think part of the idea of electronic music is that the medium makes it possible to make a lot of sounds that weren't incorporated in instrumental music. And so, you know, it's a case of the medium drives the sound.
Right. Right.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. I think we have to wrap things up there for our session. Many thanks to all three of our speakers, and we'll move on now to the afternoon keynote. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.